so much for joining me, Edleen. I am so happy that, we're finally having this conversation. And for me, I am interested in learning more about you, getting to know you more. So, my first question for you would be, what inspired you to get into leadership positions? Um, yeah, let's start with that first before I dig
Yeah,
into other things.
sure. So I think for me, if I think back over the course of, I suppose, my career and indeed life, I've always been quite driven and quite ambitious. And I think the kind of passion and desire, specifically as it relates to leadership, was recognizing that sometimes I was so lucky and so blessed to be surrounded by leaders who were passionate about the work I was doing, who had an active voice and were real advocates of the work I was doing, and were really trying to drive change. But on the flip side, I also had the negative experience of sometimes working with or indeed seeing leaders who really weren't passionate about the area of work. And they would serve as blockers to those who were potentially more junior in their teams. And that really sort of motivated me to think, hang on a second, I'm sitting here looking at what this individual is doing. I don't really think they're bought into the cause. I want to be in that position of leadership to help drive that change, because this person is potentially blocking the real journey and the real genesis that we could be going on as X organization. And so for me, that was a key motivating factor when I think about kind of leadership and my career progression.
How did you deal with those blockers? Because obviously, if you're in a position where you're trying to push for something that other people don't want, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so I think you try to navigate it by thinking about your breadth of influence or your circle of influence. So sometimes engaging people beyond your direct line management report, looking for allies more broadly across the business. Really also engaging with mentors. So learning from people who were further along in their career and saying, how do I navigate this challenge? This person is the head of X function or the head of X group, and they ultimately have the decision-making power, but they're really serving as a blocker and a challenge to drive forward whatever it is we're trying to drive forward or focus on. And so for me, it was a case of saying, how do I learn different influencing skills, different influencing styles, and who some of the key people are that I can call on to help be levers to drive forward that change. And also, let's be honest, you also get to a point where at some points in your career and throughout your journey of life, you go, actually, this organization or this management or whatever it might be are not bought into this. And you have a personal level choice. And at that personal juncture, you can decide to stay or leave. And I think that's the other thing that people do always have at their power. You're not trapped within a situation, and you have to recognize your own value, what you bring to the table, and make a personal decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. So where are you in your career journey? Because I think our audience would be interested in knowing where you are, the places, the other organizations that you've been at.
Sure. So gosh, I like to think of myself as only at the beginning, but I've been saying that for a number of years. So I started my career.
You're not at the beginning. When I read your bio, I was blown away. I couldn't help but share with a friend of mine, and she was like, she's really looking forward to hearing this conversation today. So, yeah.
Well, look, considering we're all potentially going to have to work until we're 70, I've got a good 40 years to go. So, so a long way to go. But I suppose if I think of the career journey, so I started my career out of university as an investment banker. And I'd kind of fallen into that. So whilst I was at university, I did an internship and then got offered a full-time role. And so kind of just started on that treadmill. And whilst I was doing that, realized that actually, I don't know if I really loved the financial modeling and loved the elements of investment banking. So I then went on and did something slightly different. So I did insurance broking for a while in Lloyd's of London and became a technician and broker. And whilst I was in that role, I'd still been in touch with the team that had hired me into investment banking. And they, in essence, invited me back to the organization, which had started as Lehman Brothers, had then become Nomura, to go in and lead the UK and diversity recruiting. So that was my foray into HR. And in that time, I had the benefit and the luxury of having a dotted reporting line into the head of diversity for EMEA at that time, which was a lady called Charlotte Sweeney, who I always talk about as being quite a key pivotal career moment for me, because I just loved the way she approached things. She was dynamic. She wasn't very typical of the investment banking industry. And I really felt that I could identify with that. So she was very much a role model for me. And then I moved to Morgan Stanley, where I spent a vast chunk of my career and had such wonderful experiences with various teams working across the breadth of the inclusion and diversity area. I had the opportunity to work with 3 managers over the course of my career there who were all so different and all had such inspiring and wonderful skills that they were able to kind of impart and bring to me in terms of my knowledge and my own development. And then moved across to KPMG, where I was for just over 2 years, working to lead the inclusion, diversity and social equality space before moving to the FA. So very much in kind of, as I say, for me, the early stages. And then, of course, equality, diversity, and inclusion is very much my passion. And so a lot of the things that I do outside of work have always aligned with that as well. So being involved in school governing bodies for, specialist disabled schools, or being directors on boards of organizations who are focused on this agenda is something I'm really passionate about doing, and something I think it's important to give my time across to do. So that's been the journey.
I definitely do not think that is early stages. Edleen, you are all the way up there, please. You have such a vast experience in EDI, and I think, just looking at your bio, that was one of the things that attracted me to yourself, your person, and I was really, really looking forward to this conversation. So the second thing I would ask, you seem to have a lot of stuff going on, and for people who are far into their careers, who have a passion for EDI but do not know how to navigate that, what would be your advice? Because for someone like you are an award-winning diversity, inclusion, and culture experts, and it would be best place for it to come from you as to how different organizations, different professionals can go into the conversation around EDI and champion that agenda.
Yeah, so I think it's really critical to be well informed and to have knowledge when you engage in conversations around EDI. So one of the things I also do and have been doing for a little while is consultancy across a suite of industries. So alongside my day job, I do D&I consultancy. And one of the challenges that you find is within some organizations, individuals assume that just because they come from a historically underrepresented group, that makes them an expert. So they think that because they are a woman, or because they are a Black person, or because they are gay, that all of a sudden they are an expert on actually how to navigate, implement, embed this within organizations. And the reality is that's not the case, right? It's just like me assuming, putting it into a football context, because I can kick a ball, that I'm the equivalent of Ronaldo. I'm not. Right. As much as I might like to think I am, I'm really not. And so it's really doing a lot of work to make sure you're educated and aware. But I always say to people, where there are experts, use them, leverage them, engage with them, try to understand, and try to frankly absorb and suck in the knowledge that they have. And then think about what the role you want to play and what the voice is that you want to have. So again, if I think over the breadth of my career, there have certainly been individuals who have focused on, I'm going to champion a specific cause, and that's going to be my voice that I'm always going to lend to this discussion. There have been others who have taken on a more questioning role. So they're not necessarily challenging people or confronting people in any instances, but all they are doing is asking the questions that make people go, let me reflect. So decide on what the role is that you want to play and what you want your voice to be, and then harness that skill. And then I would say, as it relates to engaging more broadly with other organizations, look, there's such a wealth of research and information out there. And particularly after the events of 2020, and of course, the kind of Black Lives Matter momentum that we've seen across the globe, there's just so many resources that people can tap into, engage in. And we have to understand that it's actually individual level responsibility that is needed as it relates to this agenda, right? It's Absolutely. Not my job as a Black female to tell you what the experience of a Black female is. You can go out and find that, and you don't have to necessarily even ask me. And so it's about making sure that people actually want to take that individual level accountability and guiding them towards the directions of the tools to be able to do that.
I couldn't agree more. I think one thing I've learned throughout the journey of this project is, as a Black woman, I don't necessarily have to teach others how to focus on EDI based stuff and how to, you know, so yeah, I don't have to teach anyone. The resources are out there for you, and we all have to take ownership in this change that we're all looking out for. You have worked in several organizations as a female leader. Has that been challenging in itself? How have you navigated that space? Because we do hear experiences of females who have found it difficult in some shape or form, which is no surprise at all. So how have you navigated that, and how would you advise, obviously, other female leaders who, or female aspirants who would be looking forward to doing that?
Sure. So my experiences as a female leader have been mixed, is the
Okay.
honest answer. So where I've been lucky and blessed to be in an organization where I have, again, managers who are supportive, individuals across the business who are champions of this agenda, then it's been an enjoyable experience. It's been one where I felt I can grow. It's been one where I felt my voice is valued. It's been one where my intersectionality is recognized.
Yes.
In organizations where it's been perhaps more challenging, it's often been because there are blockers in place, or there are people who don't frankly understand the agenda, responsible for kind of overseeing the area of work that I might be doing. Or it's been, you know, the typical one, or the classic one that you often hear in organizations, particularly when I'm consulting, is, you know, other female leaders who say, well, I got here without any extra help, so why do I need to help other people? So it's been people pulling up that ladder where they should be extending it down. And that's definitely been a challenge in some organizations I've worked with
Yeah.
from a consultancy perspective. And so it's recognizing what managerial support looks like. And like I say, I've been lucky because I have had some wonderful managers, but having those relatively early on in my career has enabled me to understand what good management looks like, and to understand how and when I'm willing to sit in those situations or those scenarios, and how and when I'm willing to exit.
Yeah.
And so for me, that level of understanding has been really critical and really key in my career. And I'm really lucky because, again, within the FA, I'm in an environment where, you know, I'm working directly for the CEO. I'm supported on this agenda. I can bounce my ideas off colleagues and other members of the senior management team. And that's great, because that motivates me, that kind of lights the fire in my fuel, and it means that we can strive to get stuff done. And you know you're supported, you know you can make mistakes, and you know that actually there are people who are there who have got your back. And I think that's quite important when you're a female leader. That's quite important when you're any leader. But I suppose you potentially do feel it more acutely when you're a female leader and there may not be as many of you, or, you know, in my case as a Black female leader, there aren't huge volumes across the broader football landscape. And so I know what that level of responsibility brings with it. But I know I'm also so well supported, and that for me is really key.
You've touched upon this already. How, as, because you did say that you started really early on, and as the youngest person or the only person of color in a room, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of being in the positions that you were in?
Yeah, so I think one of the advantages is being pretty fearless, because you're doing certain things at quite a young age.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, looking back now, maybe at some points it was naivety. But, you know, I was kind of going in saying, you know, we need to do this, and this is why we need to do it. And maybe as a relatively young person, you're maybe not aware of all of the political nuances that are surrounding some of the conversations. But it means that sometimes you're able to ask the awkward questions that other people can't do or don't feel comfortable doing. So that was a massive disadvantage, a massive advantage, sorry. As it relates to a disadvantage, I think sometimes when you are a young voice, or the only voice in the room, people in organizations that aren't supportive, they don't value that voice and they don't value that perspective. And so that's where you have to think about different ways to enable people to understand the value that you bring. You know, people will sometimes, you know, I've definitely been in rooms where people will make comments and say things like, oh yeah, well, you know, the millennials think like this. And I think this is really interesting, because I don't think like that, and I'm a millennial. So let's challenge that and let's talk about it, right? And so I think, yeah, being young means that there's sometimes been a level of just, you know, I am what I am. And that's developed and changed as I've gone throughout my career as well. But definitely I can think, in the early days, I would very much say, this is my perspective, like that perspective, that is my perspective, that's my view.
Yeah.
So if you're asking me for my view, that's the view. And so, yeah, that was good in some ways, because you could land some difficult messages. But I think, sometimes when you are young, there is the assumption of like, oh, have you lived enough? Have you seen enough? And getting people to recognize the value that you do bring can sometimes be challenging. But look, it's fair to say that's changing as I'm getting older as well. So, now people aren't referring to me as young so often.
No, in my opinion, you look very young. I would not even want to ask how old you are, because to me, you look very young, and we're going to leave it there.
Correct.
We're going to leave it there. What's that thing you would tell your younger self in a personal and professional space?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question. So my younger self in a professional space, I would probably say, always remember to keep that voice.
Okay.
So I can definitely think of in certain organizations or in certain situations where, because I was the young person, or because I felt like I had a leader that wasn't necessarily supportive, I wouldn't always speak up and say what I was thinking. And then I'd leave the session or the meeting or whatever it might be, and I'd be kicking myself for not having done that. And for me, that boils down to actually saying to my younger self, just always feel fine being authentic. Because authenticity is key. And again, the right organizations and the right leaders or managers or whatever you want to call it will value that authenticity. So that's what I'd say to my younger self in a professional sense. And in a personal sense, I'd probably say make more time to chill. So I think I'm not so good at chilling. So even when I think I'm chilling, I'm really lucky. I've got friends who will say, Edleen, I thought you said you weren't going to do ABC. Why are you now doing ABC? Yeah. And so I'd say make more time for that, because sometimes you can get so caught up and focused, particularly within a work context, that you miss moments that you can't get back. And so the one I always remember is when I was working as an investment banker, and it was my 21st birthday, and I didn't make it home for my 21st birthday, as in like I was. Yeah. And I look back on that and I go like, you only get one 21st birthday, right? Like that's not going to come around again. And so, yeah, it's learn to chill and recognize where you might want to adjust your priorities so that personal is first. That's what I tell my younger self.
I think that's amazing. I think in the current climate that we're all in, everyone is trying to achieve one thing or the other, and sometimes we may lose ourselves in the process. I think what this period has taught me is family, friends, those that are around you are very important, and
100%.
each day counts, because not to be dreadful, but you just never know.
No, you might not have tomorrow. Yeah. No, agreed. Agreed.
That's amazing. So in terms of, how you go through each day, what are the values that keep you going? We're drawing close to the end now. So what are the values that keep you going?
Yeah. So for me, key values that keep me going are understanding the purpose of whatever it is I'm trying to achieve. So what is the purpose of what I'm doing in my day job, what I'm doing externally, how I engage with my family, what do I want the end goal to be? The second is around being honest, and sometimes brutally honest, right? So I think one of the key things that leaders can and should do is be able to say, do you know what, I've made a mistake. That was the wrong call, or that was the wrong direction, and learn how to self-fix.
And it takes a lot to do that, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It takes a lot to do that. It takes a lot to put your hand up and go, oh, I called this one wrong, right? Yeah. And I think you have to be able to do that, and have to be able to learn from mistakes. And for me, I think another thing that I really champion or have at the heart of everything I do is what is the bigger cause. So again, not to be morbid, but I'm fully aware that I'm not going to be here in 100 years time, and the world is probably going to be here in 100 years time. So what is the mark or the legacy that I'm going to have left because of the things that I've done? And I recognize it may not be a huge legacy, right? It may be something small, but let me wake up every day and champion towards whatever that small legacy is. So that's the way in which my my brain is wired. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it just is.
No, it is amazing, because something about me is I am always focusing on high level things that just look big on paper to other people, and I forget the small wins, I forget the
Yeah.
little achievements, and I think other people are wired the same. So your perspective is refreshing, and I
Yeah.
think it's very, very important. Yes, definitely.
Oh,
Final question.
sure.
If you do have that magic wand to change anything, personal, professional space, what would it be, or what are those things that you would want to change, looking at the world
Yeah.
we're living in?
So I always say professionally, and I always lead with this, right? The ideal case scenario within organizations is that you don't need to hire somebody like me, right? You don't need an equality, diversity, and inclusion expert, because actually it's solved. And your organization are doing it, and people are having equality of opportunity, and people are valued, respected, listened to, heard, and progressing. So that's if I could wave a magic wand, I'd probably wave myself out of every job that I've ever had, because society would be a place where people are respected and treated equally. So that would be it at a professional level. If I could wave a magic wand personally, what would I do? I'd probably just wave it. I just want more time. I just think there's always time. And I think the years run away and they go really quickly, and look at the past 12 months. I can't believe that we're 12 months on from where we were last year. And so time.
Yeah, yeah. And you
Yeah.
can never get it back. So you just have to think about the now and the future, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's living every moment and every day as if it's your last, right? And sometimes deciding these are the things I am going to focus on, and this might have to wait. And here are the reasons why. So for me, I'm really honest with myself about that. And when I am even failing to be honest with myself about that, I'm lucky that I've surrounded myself with amazing family and amazing friends who will absolutely check and challenge me, who will put me in my place. And that's really important for me.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Edleen.
No
Your
worries.
perspective, your knowledge, everything that you do is just, it's amazing.
Oh, my pleasure.
I've enjoyed this really quick conversation with you.
No, my pleasure. And look, anything I can do to help, just let me know.